Senator Lowenthal, you held an informational hearing, as I recall,
Yes.
in your capacity as chair of the Transportation Committee at the time that I attended. I laid out some concerns then. I'm going to lay them out again more briefly, and if folks from High Speed Rail want to respond, that's fine. If not, and we'll pick it up from there. I continue to describe myself as a supporter of High Speed Rail done right. I continue to be quite troubled by the inability or unwillingness of the authority, in my observation and experience over the last year and a half to 2 years now, to respond to the requests or concerns that are articulated not just by members of the public, but by the legislature, both formally and informally. And as I said at the informational hearing you chaired, Senator Lowenthal, at this point, within just this past year, 2010, we've heard significant concerns articulated by the LAO, the auditor, the inspector general, the Institute for Transportation Studies, and the peer review group, when 5 different entities, each one of which is freestanding, independent, relatively objective, relatively well-credentialed, all articulate significant concerns. I think it behooves all of us in the process to take stock of the concerns that they've articulated and ask ourselves, why is it that we have this level of concern among such a range of folks? I've yet to get an answer to that. There sort of continues to be the don't worry, we've got it under control, and it's a disappointment to me. Please correct me if I am wrong, folks from the authority. I'm sure you've been keeping track. In the 10 years I've been in the legislature, I believe I voted for high-speed rail at every opportunity when the matter was before me as a legislator. When there were efforts to delay placement of the measure on the ballot, I voted against those measures because I thought we ought to move forward on a timely basis. In the last 2 years of budget, I believe I voted for every budget allocation that's come before this budget subcommittee, and I know I voted for the transportation budget generally. Last year, we had 6 items that were contained in budget language that were placed as conditions on the items. In our meeting here, May 24th, in this very same room, Mr. Katz, as a representative of the authority, sat in that very chair and made a commitment in an open and public hearing that the High-Speed Rail Authority would respond to each and every one of the requests that was in the budget language. Ms. Porvahidi, you were here. You sat in that chair and made the same commitment. When Mr. Van Ark, you showed up in July and expressed some concern about the budget language, you and I talked in my office. We had what I thought was a candid conversation, and you committed to me that you would support the budget language and live with the terms of it. And then, not that long after, we get a letter from the High-Speed Rail Authority that says we're no longer prepared to meet our commitment, and we get a veto from the governor at the instigation of the High-Speed Rail Authority. At this point, it's very hard for me to operate with any trust or with any expectation of good faith. I am still at a loss, in spite of the informational hearing that we had with Senator Lowenthal, as to understand what possible basis there is for reneging on that commitment that was made not once, not twice, but 3 times. And at some point, you just have to sort of step away and say, well, apparently the commitments that are made are not commitments that I can count on. And that makes it hard to go forward, new year or no new year. So that's where I am. We've got a letter that I think, if I read it correctly, purports to provide assurances that 4 of the 6 items will be addressed within the next 2 weeks. That's my reading of it. The numbers and letters don't line up quite with the numbers and letters that were in the original language, which is progress, but not enough and not soon enough. I will just respond, make one or two more observations, and then we'll go to the High-Speed Rail Authority for any opening comments before we go through item by item. The comment that was made at the hearing that you chaired, Mr. Lowenthal, was that it was the absence of staff and the delayed budget that precluded a response to all this. I'm looking at today's materials, which indicate that there is a $199 million contract for program management functions, that there is an $8 million contract for program management oversight, that there is a $9 million contract for public information. All of this work somehow seems to be doable under contract, but when it comes time to answer half a dozen questions from the legislature, the information is not forthcoming in spite of the fact that hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent pursuant to contract, and yet we can't get a direct answer to a direct question. Some of these questions have been outstanding for more than a year. I'm thinking particularly of the concern that was raised in a much earlier hearing that you held, Mr. Lowenthal, on the and the question about how we can possibly provide an assurance of public funding as a guarantee for private sector investors, consistent with the language that is in the original ballot measure. All of these are issues that can just continue to be unanswered, and that's a concern I have. The other point I want to make is I have copies of the Legislative Council's letter to me of November the 2nd that indicates that the governor's line item veto is unlawfully made. The language in the letter, which I read at your hearing, but I want to read again for the record, is that elimination of provision 2, that was our budget language, in our view did not constitute a valid exercise of the governor's line item veto power. Therefore, we conclude that the governor was not authorized to veto provision number 2 of item so on and so forth of Section 2 of the Budget Act of 2010 pursuant to the line item veto. The challenge we face, of course, is that whether it was authorized or not, he did it, and he's no longer in the building, so it's a little hard to have a follow-up conversation on that subject. But I'm not all that enthusiastic about coming to new agreements if it turns out that folks are simply going to go downstairs and ask for another veto, lawful or not. Why don't we, I think we